Good afternoon. This is Dr. Mary Kay Keller of Life is a Learning Curve podcast. And today I have with me Dr. Kim Parrish. Dr. Kim Parrish is going to talk on the topic of migration and family in Eastern Europe dialogue. Her background is in family science. She has 20 years of experience in family science and is an elementary school counselor as a teaching professor for 15 years with a PhD in human sciences, an MS from a university, and a CFLE and a school guidance counselor for 10 years. We are glad to welcome Kim to our podcast today. And she's also been noted in our Will Mew magazine. So I'll place that link out there after we're done with our podcast. So Kim, feel free to go ahead and talk about asylum and seekers and refugees this morning. And I know we kind of split this out into 3 categories, but I just want to turn you loose and hear what you have to share with all of us.
Okay, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on the program today. And to begin, I suppose, I did do my dissertation on asylum and migration and the family dynamics involved, and did actually study on an island in a refugee camp located in Chios, Greece. So that is approximately 3.5 miles from Turkey, and is actually Greek territory. So for what happens in this particular part of the world, it is very easy to navigate, and the history is long, so there may be questions that we can navigate through that. But people coming from the Middle East, coming from Syria, coming from Iraq, coming from Iran, coming from any of the countries in the northern African region, and also from Afghanistan. So you have a large population that can migrate. And the majority are migrating because of war and because of many political regimes and many atrocities that are happening within their country, whether that be a war-torn country or whether that be a country where there is some type of political unrest. So as they're migrating through to Greece in 2015, the large migration began and the big numbers came. And from 2015, the Balkan route was open, which is actually a land route up through the borders that border the European Union states, through the countries that are aforementioned. And so up until 2016, there was also a land ability to come to Europe. However, late 2016, beginning of 2017, that closed, and this left the waters as the legal opportunity to reach Europe, beginning in Eastern Europe. So that's the beginning of why in 2017 I was able to choose the refugee camp located on Chios, Greece. And the particular camp name is Camp Suda. And in Camp Suda, I was able to interview 15 people. And of those included some unaccompanied minors. And an unaccompanied minor is someone who is under the age of 18 and has begun navigation and has proceeded to a reception center where they are first beginning their asylum in Europe. So of this, there are 5 unaccompanied minors in the research study, and then the rest were family members. So from this study and from this dissertation, for applied research, I did a phenomenological study in which we were wanting to see what actually transpired and how the dynamics of the family, what were the people's stories. We wanted to hear 3 parts. What was the what was the pre-flight condition, or in other words, what was the condition of the country, the home, the land of origin, and what was the trans-flight, what was the middle portion of what was happening as they were navigating across the land or across the borders, and then in this particular instance across the sea. So that's the middle portion of their adventure, and then their next portion of their travel would be post flight. So as landing on Chios, what were their experiences? What were their hopes? What were their dreams? And that was particularly the fun part, because you got to hear many people hoping for education. Their country had been torn apart by war, and they simply wanted to have the opportunity to go to school. So that was the beginning of my navigation through walking through what was it to be a refugee, and looking at asylum processes, and looking also at how, you have a family, some have to leave their family in order to begin this travel, and then also how this travel is such an extensive period of time. For example, it's very common to travel for 5 years before you land at a reception center where you begin your asylum process.
Well, Kim, I mean, I can't even imagine families having to leave like extended family. I hope that never comes to the U.S., comes home to roost. But, just being across the country from my adult children and my grandchildren, is, it's hard. And as I shared with you, I recently traveled by car to go and see them, but to really know that you've left your home and that you can never go back, and then not know what kind of a reception. I mean, I have a question that's just rising up within me. First of all, do you see a lot of children? Did you see a lot of children coming through?
Yes, and I think that was really the catalyst that led me to want to plant an NGO, or in the Greek terminology, a mikio, here in Athens, Greece, which is a not-for-profit organization, in order to give aid or begin to help to assimilate some of those young folks into what you might see, either education, well-being, or into life as a bridge, that they may be staying in Greece, or they may be going on to another place in Europe. So in Greece now, there are 4,393 children, and of those, 1,900 are in reception centers, meaning that they are still in camp. And so those children are under 18. They're the unaccompanied minors. And so those children have come across with no legal guardian or parent. And why, you might ask, why has that happened? Sometimes in those travels, if we talk about it takes 5 years, takes 3 years, takes 2 years to travel, oftentimes for here in particular in the eastern part of Europe, you may have to travel through those countries aforementioned, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, in order to get to Turkey, which is still open post closing of the Balkan route. So in order to do this, you may have to leave with someone who your parent has paid to take you through these places, so that you can have a chance and have an opportunity. So oftentimes you find children who are as young as 4 and even as young as 2 have to leave and travel through those countries, and then leave to go across the ocean or the sea rather, from Turkey, to land on one of the main islands near Greece, roughly, like I said, 3.5 miles from Turkey, in order to begin processing. So that's the rationale. The reason why is so that there's an opportunity, there's a chance, there is some way that the child, even if they do have to separate, and even if there is potential danger, and even if there is potential harm, at least there's a glimmer of hope. So there are many unaccompanied minors. That number that I mentioned are just those that are registered.
I can't imagine the desperation a parent must feel to have to send their child on alone just to think that they might survive something that they're not going to. I mean, that's just unimaginable. How has this, sorry, I'm getting emotional. How has this impacted you personally?
So in 2017, I don't think I anticipated the fact that I might be over here full time and away from from my family, albeit that they are grown kids and they are, the youngest is almost 20, but still I'm away from family too. So I wanted a glimmer of that also. But I think the most impactful thing was as I began to talk to those who were unaccompanied, those minors of those in the study, there were 5. So as I began to hear and begin to meet parents on FaceTime, you've got this mom figure over there. And actually my son, who was 22 at the time, came with me as well. So he was able to meet many of those that were his age. And as I began to hear the stories of why I left, and as I began to hear the heartbreak of what they saw in their country, and I was impacted in a way that led me to be here full time. And there's not a great word that shows the amount of empathy I have for them. And I can't imagine the experience. I can't imagine on the other side being the mom or the dad that needs to send your child in order for them to have some glimmer of hope of just simple education. We take that so much for granted in the States. And it's something that is, these kids work very hard. They call them kids. They're under, those under 20, I'd say. They want to go and they want to learn. They want desperately to have an opportunity to go to a grade school. So in other words, a high school. And then the long-term goal would be possibly to make it to a university, just a simple way to discover what their occupation might be, what they're interested in. And it's the percentage of those who are refugees who actually do make it here in Eastern Europe to a university is very slim, 3%. There's 3% that will be able to make it to a university. They have to learn English. Many of them have not been in school. They left their country when they, let's say, for example, one of those who's become very near and dear to me in particular. His name is Ali. And so he left his country, Afghanistan. Schools were closed. There was not safe for them to go to school anymore. Bombings every day. So school had to be closed. His last school was in 4th grade or grade 4. When he left, he continued to study in the hopes that he might be able to learn English one day. When we met him last year, when I met him, he was able to speak just a few words. Hello, how are you? Why don't I learn English, for example? So we began to invest some time in him and teach him English. And now he is in a school. He's actually 18, but he's in grade 9. So we're taking him through a online school that is based in the States, actually out of Florida, in the hopes that he might obtain his diploma, in the hopes that he might have a chance to go forward. He's having to work very hard. And, he has not been in school. If he's 18, he has not been in school since he was merely 8. So he has a huge gap, but yet he's willing to do whatever it takes in order to have some hope. But he's one of the 3%. So that might make it.
That might make it. One of the 3%. I don't know that living here in America, we know this stuff goes on out there, but I don't think we really connect with it in a way that allows us to have the kind of empathy and the motivation that you have had. And I really want to commend you for that. I noticed too, like in your profile, you talked about living without a community. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
for the refugee living without a community. In other words, I think that let's take Ali, for example. When he came, he was alone, and he left his country when he was and had traveled. The last time he saw his parents, his mom and his dad, was when he was 12. So for him, community became those other refugees that he met in camps, and usually those who are young are kept in a different portion of the camp, away from families, away from single men, single women. They try their best to keep them safe, although that's not all possible by any means. So that's another topic for discussion. But the community became, for him, those who were in the unaccompanied minors camp in the section A or B, for example. And so it became something very hard to build attachment. Let's say for now, community may be the people who come over and who volunteer with us as an organization. And I think for me personally, that's why I've taken, he feels like a fourth child to me. And so I think that, we can be part of his community. But for Ali, for example, he just this week lost his father, and his father died. His father died on the way to try to reunite. They were held up and got to Turkey, but because of Corona, had to turn back in Iran. His father has a heart condition, and he died this week. And so it's been heartbreaking to watch the fact that he didn't see his father face to face. And the last time that he did, he was only 12. He was just a young child. So
that's just heartbreaking.
It is very heartbreaking. We do in the States, we are separated sometimes from our family, but we have the ability to be able to somehow get to our family, even in the midst of a coronavirus. If we had a family member who was sick, if we had a death in the family, we are able to. There was no possibility. There were no way that they could.
No options.
He could even, no options, zero options to even attend a funeral. So,
the loss is just incomprehensible to me with them. I mean, you're talking about such multiple levels of loss, the disconnection from the family, the disconnection from the community, the inability to even return, to be able to once again have that relationship. I was trying to, I was thinking as you were talking, I just watched this movie with Reese Witherspoon. Have you seen it? The one where she's in the Midwest somewhere, and there's a church there that takes in refugees from different countries. And so she ended up with four boys from Nigeria. And I'm telling you, I know it's a made for TV movie kind of thing, but just what those kids had been through just before just to get out of the country. And then it was like it was never going to end, and to actually sacrifice one of their brothers in order. I mean, those kind of decisions children are not supposed to have to make, and our brains, one thing I do, the indomitable spirit of the human kind, that our brains are wired for survival. And even as young as they are wired to survive, and they are wired to thrive, but to see it happening at ages where they're so tender and developmentally, it's so inappropriate for them to have to make decisions. It just is mind-boggling.
You find that there is no end to the stories that you hear as you meet parents and as you meet people, so much so that there's a loss of motor skill, there's a loss of verbal skill, these things. And that there have been layers upon layers upon layers of trauma for those type of physical aspects to come caving in. So the stories that you hear, the death that the students that walk home from school and don't see the student that's right behind them the next day because there was a bomb that went off. Those are the real stories that, for example, were in my dissertation. And, so much so that even a brother who's lost a part of an organ of his body so that he could save his family and so that they would not come to the home to arrest the mom or dad. There are just there that would take a whole chapter of talking in order to just expound on those stories. But
sound like you have a documentary inside of you.
There is something like that, and it's all not necessarily what about it. It's about their story and about how, yes, there's so much resilience, and yes, the human nature is survival, but it humbles me that there is still this fight inside. But on the other hand, you do see where it comes to the point where there is physical harm to yourself. There are just cases after cases after cases of cutting, of self-harm, because there is a point where the human emotion just cannot take it anymore. And those are the places that are very hard to deal with. The good places where they can see some glimmer of hope because they've learned a sentence of English and they don't even know how to read and write their own language. Those are the good parts. So there is, I don't know, there's a seesaw back and forth between those two, into where you see the depths of sorrow and that's portrayed in a way that's harmful. And you see the glimmer of hope where, like I said, it might be a simple, I've learned how to say one sentence in English and I don't know how to write or read in Farsi because I had to leave school so early. And matter of fact, this particular person I'm thinking of didn't speak for quite some time. So I'm looking at a 16-year-old who verbally has a speech impediment because there was not speech available to him for some trauma that's undisclosed at this time.
Kim, what about secondary trauma? How do you cope with this? I mean, I can't imagine trying to hold those stories every day because I'm such an emotional person. I just can't even imagine.
I think one thing that I get to do when I'm asked to tell their story, that's very empowering for me because maybe they don't have the language, maybe they don't have the voice, but if I can know the story and tell someone or tell a group of people, then to me that's just fire in my belly because I get an opportunity, I get to share, I get to say, we have such comfort in our own states, in our own country. And not that your trauma is any different, but there's another side of trauma. There's another life that you probably most assuredly may not understand. And here's what it looks like. Here's the story. Here's the human survival. And here's the human sorrow. So I think for that, it helps me, but I do have to make sure I'm writing. I do need to make sure that I'm journaling. I do need to make sure that I have someone that I am telling the stories to. And as a mom of 3 kids and one that is also can be very emotional, there are times when I have to have a complete breakdown.
Yes. Well, you wouldn't be human if you didn't. And that's probably your strength in a way, because, a lot of times we talk about breakdowns and I say they're really breakthroughs. They're emotional breakthroughs that get us to the next stage, to be able to pick up one more time and keep going back. How has Greece responded? I'm very curious because, of course, we've got the border wall, and I'm going to digress just for a moment. What incensed me so bad is how we entrapped those people, because a lot of people are not aware that they just don't flood the gates at the Mexican border. But the way the laws are set up in the United States, you have to physically be here to seek asylum. So it was entrapment. They had to physically be on American soil and then they're jailed, and separated. Yes. And, just the opposite, it sounds like what's happening in Greece. How is their response in comparison? And I mean, you don't need to compare it. You could just, put it out there as to what it is. But
So in Greece, for example, it is something of the same. So although there are more open concepts of borders here, and especially for the sea border now, although now that coronavirus has become a new border in addition to the border that is already physically here. So that's changed things a lot. There's not as many coming from Turkey. They're held up in Turkey, they're held up in Iran, they're held up in camps all scattered throughout the regions that we've been talking about. So for Europe, for Greece, when they do land in Greece, they are able to begin the process of asylum, being that they become a legal asylum seeker. Now, for Greece, as processes are, every process is slow. For us to establish an organization here, very slow. So it's something like, I say to students who might be coming over sometimes or volunteering, that our processes in the United States, albeit need reform, are very linear. The process here is circular, so much so that if you can imagine your computer, when it's ready to, or when it's not finding what it's looking for, it goes around and around in a circle and circles the drain. That's something like the process is here, even for me, for paperwork, and I have many privileges. So let's take that down 1,000 notches for someone who's coming in asylum and someone who is seeking to become a political refugee. So when you become a political refugee, you deny your rights to your country. So you are no longer able to, say, for example, for Ali, he's no longer able to go back to Afghanistan no matter what. And economic asylum, if you receive or not receive, but if the indication after you go through your interview and your circular circling the drain procedure that probably takes 2 to 3 years, if you do receive the notification that you are economic asylum, then you go back, you're deported, but you may be in limbo for 5, 6, 7 years, or you just may sit in limbo forever. But so how to say and how to describe. The anticipation is good, that this is a hospitable place. They understand the war-torn countries. They understand this because they have a heritage of this in Greece. And we in the United States, and my neighborhood does have many Greeks, and all scattered throughout the United States, there are many Greek neighborhoods. So they understand the fact that you need to move from your country when your country is in danger, and there is political problems. However, because Greece has also gone through, in the 90s, also went through an economic repression, there's also not as much economic balance in order to bring in this multitude of people who are flooding and have flooded their country. So that's
sounds like it's
another
a stress
story.
on their system.
It's a stress on their system. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. And yes, there is money received from the EU, but where that money is going, not for me to say, but is it going all to the right place? That's speculation from Greek people. So, and Greek organizations. But now when, in the recent years, in the past 3 years, I'll say, since the closing of the Balkan route and the Turkey EU deal in 2016, 2017, then the remainder of the EU began to leave a bottleneck in Greece. So they weren't able to take in as many asylum or refugees either. So the number became fewer and fewer and fewer. So what happened is the people are still coming through the land or through the sea onto the islands. What happened is Greece became this bottleneck of legal people here of roughly 90,000, and there are 100,000 asylum processes at the end of the year that were unanswered in 2019. So in the queue, in other words. So
So what happens when that happens? I'm sorry for interrupting you. My questions start bubbling up. When they're like in limbo like that, do they stay there? I mean, how do they survive while they're in limbo?
That's the answer. That's the big question. So yes, there are organizations, but even organizations can't, even humanitarian organizations such as ours, and we're just like we're not even an infant. We are just beginning. So the organizations can fill in the gap, but in limbo means that maybe, for example, in a certain area near our organization where our physical place is, there are 100 people living in the park. So that they are awaiting some kind of housing. So it also means that maybe 5 families live together in a very small apartment, and children are made to be quiet. So that goes into another realm of some developmental problems that we've seen in the fact that children, if you're in this scenario, that you need to be quiet because there are 5 other families living in the same apartment, and it's just difficult. So the money and the accommodations and the assimilation is very challenging. But the limbo portion is probably, you're talking about secondary trauma. For me, that's the most difficult because there's no answer.
Yeah. I know this is a pretty broad statement, but I really think we're all one human race. We all are. It's one human race. There are not multiple human races. When we are complacent about the health and welfare of our children, I think we're headed for extinction. It's unfathomable to me that we think we can keep going like this and not have some sort of horrible repercussions globally, when we don't care enough to take care of our children and other people's children. That just, it's unfathomable to me. I just, I can't comprehend it. What are some of the things, like if you were to talk to viewers about actions that they could take? Maybe this is a good place to take a quick break, and I'll let you think about that for a second. What kind of actions would you like to call from our listeners today? And we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Thank you. So Kim will just sit here for a couple of seconds. Before we go back in, I can cut this part out.
Okay, I'll stretch.
Yeah, me too. I need a good stretch.
This is the part that makes me tense, is when we talk about those in limbo, because there's no answer.
I know.
But yes.
But maybe somebody will hear us. And have, I was thinking while you were talking, I kept thinking, I just read where Tom Hanks and his wife have gotten citizenship over there. And I thought, when we're done and this goes live, I'm going to Twitter Tom Hanks.
Right. That's exactly
I know that sounds crazy, but you got to take whatever shots you can get, right?
Sure. That's right. So. As being an American citizen, would he like to invest in helping to assimilate and educate? And
maybe when we come back, we could pitch that thought.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Oh, yes. Wouldn't it be amazing to have somebody at that level take notice of all of it? Okay, so we'll start up here in just a second. Thank you again for doing this today.
Sure.
Okay, so we're back with Dr. Parrish, and we were just thinking about, before we went to break, we were talking about maybe action calls, things that we could request from the speakers that are listening today.
I think a very good answer. One of them that I can think of is to help with education. So, for example, in talking about, I know I've used Ali as a person for example, but we are able to sponsor him in school. So sponsorship of refugees who are wanting to complete a diploma and perhaps move on or even complete a university or apply for maybe even a GED. But the opportunity to have education is something that I think that is empowering. And of course that takes money, and of course that takes ability, as everything does, to have the funds to do that. So it's not free for them to be able to go to online school. For people who are here in Greece, for those who need tutors in Greek school, I think that there are plenty of opportunity for example, for us as an organization to bring on people who can be tutors in Greek school for those who are young and they don't have language. And they've been given the opportunity to go to Greek school, but still it's very difficult because they don't know Greek and it's all in Greek. So to be successful and to assimilate, you need someone to come alongside of you. And I think that those are some action calls. I think that people reaching out to say, hey, what is this all about? What is your organization? What are other organizations with a multitude of people, the multitude of children, and the lack of just basic needs in refugee camps in particular? What are things that can be done? What are ways that we can help in just basic needs? And that's huge and vast and large. But I think just encouraging people to ask those questions is something that can be very beneficial, because oftentimes it leads to another dialogue with the person, and oftentimes it even leads to an investment in a certain person. So I think that for me, if people take an interest in, and then I think that the road is just wide open from there.
That was a great response. I think, people oftentimes we want to help and we just don't know what to do. And during the break, I was half joking about it, but I decided it's a really good idea. I hope somebody out there knows Tom Hanks, who just got his citizenship and would take an interest in a new project over in Greece. And here you are, ready for the picking, so.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
To help those children. I know you mentioned earlier something about students who are wanting to get involved. How would they contact you? I have your email, and I know you through Wilmington University. However, I'm not real sure, like students internationally, students, at other universities, what would be the best method for them to reach out to you?
So I can link in the websites and things like that for them to just gather up some information. But for example, right now we have 5 students. One is from California. He has finished his school and he's actually working in a job, but did take the summer off to be an intern here. And what is he doing? He's helping with some construction, and he's helping with some just basic English, and also helping with some music therapy. And so he's helping to teach guitar. So what that does in part of what we do as an organization is art therapy, which brings about well-being and also brings about the connection of the brain and opens up some of those neurons. And so does music. So it allows you to be able to perhaps open your mind to the possibility that maybe you can learn English. And so although I keep speaking about English, but it can help you to learn Greek. Maybe it can even help you to learn German if you're going on to or hoping to go on to another European country. So the interns that we have here are 5, but the other 4 are students. So we have one who's a working adult and the other 4 are students, and they've come just for the summer. So that's a 10-week, 8-week program. It can fluctuate between what you need as far as, how your summer schedule works. And from January to March, I actually had 2 students who were serving as interns here. They were working on their undergraduate within sociology and within actually legal, wanting to be a paralegal, working in legal studies, and they wanted a glimpse into the international perspective. So they were gaining in their education, they were gaining what social services look like and what sociology looks like in the States, but they also wanted to know what does it look like for those 2 fields internationally. So there's opportunity year-round for people to come and serve, in other words, volunteer in their studies, and perhaps even as those students did, they can gain some college credits, and I help them navigate through. Upon approval, I can be their supervisor, and that helps both of us. It gives volunteers for me and our organization and what happens here, and it also gives them the ability to gain some relevant experience, and to also gain some personal knowledge in other cultures and in their field of study, and it also gives them some college credits. So I foresee, I have one master's student who's here, so I foresee that growing. I've had mostly undergraduates, but I can see that it would be wonderful if folks were growing in the counseling field, if they were growing even in art therapy, those who are actually going into this as a field, that they would get experience internationally. But that's one way, and I can link in the contact to be able to apply for such a thing.
Well, that's incredible. I had two simultaneous thoughts. One is that sign language, by the way, helps people express emotionally and supports emotional intelligence as well. And sometimes it allows people to build their vocabulary in a much more extensive way, so that when they start speaking the language, that they're able to connect with that. And there's been some research done out there, mostly on baby sign language, but they become very articulate after they start speaking. The other thing was that talking about the students, let me hang on. I think I've almost lost that second thought. That's just not what I wanted to do. But thinking about, for instance, like students, being able to come over there. So when I was at Florida State University, there was a gentleman that came in one of our introductory courses there, and they do this one course where they familiarize the new graduate students. I was working on my doctorate there, but everybody goes through this one course where they familiarize with you what all the departments in the university do. And he was from international studies, and he came in and he said, the one thing that I wish we would make mandatory in this country is that every either high school student, like, 12th grade, or new college student would go have an experience on international territories, because he said, we do not have an outside perspective. And, my light bulb went on, Kim, because I couldn't figure out, growing up, I felt like I didn't fit in here in the U.S., and I didn't know where that came from until that moment, because I was born in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. And my dad was in the military, and they left when I was 6 months old. And so I didn't actually come back to the States. His first deployment was over to Japan, where my identical twin brothers were born. And then we went from there back to the States because I was sick, and I was in Walter Reed Hospital for a couple of months. But after that, he was deployed again to France. So relatively speaking, I was 7 before I landed back in the United States again. And that meant separation from their family of origin. My grandparents, I'm in the middle of 27 cousins, on my mom's side, and there's only us 5 and my 2 cousins on my dad's side, but they have a large family. He had a lot of aunts and uncles. So we come back into this family system, and everybody's like, oh, they know me, but I didn't know them. And so, it was really a traumatic adjustment a lot of times, because people kind of assume that you're just like them.
Sure.
And I definitely wasn't. I had this worldview perspective. It wasn't my choice. It was something I was born into, but I am so grateful for it, especially in these days, because I realize it helped me open up to other human beings, like we were talking about in the intermission. I'm trying to think of what her name is. She teaches on racism, and her videos right now are just really flowing through the internet. And, Jane something is it, I think. Anyway, is her last name? It's not Evans, is it? I can't remember. But anyway, it's out there, and I could, follow up with it with anybody that's interested. But she talks about how we are all one part of the cog in the human race. There is only one human race. There is over 8.7 million living species on the planet, and only one of those is the human race.
That's
when
right.
When you take a look at that, and I've often found it funny back when they decided that dolphins were talking to each other, because it was like, oh, dolphins are talking to each other, and I'm thinking they always have. We just figured
Mm-hmm.
out there's a code, you know. And then
Mm-hmm.
they went with whales, and then, you know, Jane Goodall's relationship with the
Sure.
with the baboons, and how they emote expression. You know, I don't know if you've seen that video where the elephants, when the baby elephant died, the moms all connected and went in a circle, and it was definitely a grief reaction, you know.
Mm.
And sometimes as human beings, I think we're so arrogant, you know, not realizing that we're kind of stewards on this planet,
Sure.
because we do have higher intelligence even when we don't act like it. And there's 8.7 living million species out there that have their own form of intelligence, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we
Mm-hmm.
haven't cracked that code. But you would think, as feeling like we are the superior ones, we would be better caretakers of everyone
Mm.
around us. You know, I think we
Right.
have that responsibility in this life to be better caretakers of ourselves and everyone around us. So I know I kind of
Right.
jumped the track there, but to me, these things are all interconnected. You know, it's like how we treat other human beings is usually a reflection on what's going on in our own internal world. And listening to you talk, I mean, I was really humbled by the fact that you've continued this work and you do it every day. Because like I said, I just find it heartbreaking just hearing about it. And yet
Mm.
listening to you about how empowered you are when you get a chance to speak out about it.
Mm.
You know, and like I said, I certainly hope Tom Hanks gets a whiff of this. Somebody might know him who might hear the podcast, you know. We can dream, right? You know, so,
Sure.
or someone
Absolutely.
else, you know, someone else who doesn't want to be known for what they're doing, you know, a benefactor. So you know, I pray that happens, and especially for these children. Are there any last thoughts that you want to discuss, or anything that you think you might not have covered that you would want our listeners to know about today?
If you'll let me, I think I'll leave with a story that one of the students, since we were on a
Oh, you
student,
betcha.
yes, I think she wrote a departing story as we were working in a refugee camp on the island of Lesbos. And here's her story. So she was here with us for the summer, the 10-week time last summer. And this is what she wrote. So I'll paraphrase a bit. But during our time in the refugee camp in Lesbos, we did a lot of art. And I mean a lot. We found that one of the most useful tools we could bring to the environment was creativity. For the end of our last day with the unaccompanied minors, a new boy sat next to me and asked me to draw him out of the blue. He wanted a self-portrait. I don't normally draw people, she says, but I couldn't say no to this boy. I began drawing him, and suddenly there was a crowd of people watching and enjoying the experience as well. Watching this boy's face as he watched someone else create something for him, of him, was priceless. I felt as if in this moment I was showing him that he truly was worth the world, or that he was worthy enough to be drawn. At the end, my picture wasn't perfect, but he was ecstatic about it. He and his friends just jumped for joy and exclaimed how wonderful this portrait was. Next, my friend started asking me about art and how I got my skills. Eventually, through translation issues, he understood that I do art for my job and I can teach him. The next thing you know, I knew he had paints and paper, and he says, "You're the teacher, I'm the student. You do, I copy. Okay." And I said, "Okay," she says. I would draw a flower and he would attempt to draw a flower. He didn't like what he created, but then I gave him suggestions of how to make it better, and he got very excited about what he was drawing. After everything we painted together, he would grade my drawing and I would grade his. These grades were from no good of his to 100 to 100,000 million. Once it was time to leave, and this was the only day that we had in order to finish this art activity, he couldn't find the drawing I made of him. He was visibly upset as he kept saying, "Someone took it, someone took it." After a few moments of searching endlessly, we found it and we parted. The joys that come from creating. I've noticed that many of the refugees, child or adult, enjoy creating art. They enjoy making things. They enjoy being understood that they are worthy to be drawn, that they are worthy to be listened to, that they are worthy to express themselves, and they are not invisible.
They're seen. Every
They're
human being
seen.
has that desire to just be seen, you know,
Yes.
and heard and be
Yes.
experienced.
Yes. So
Yes.
as the human race, as we are people, we need to see each other, hear each other,
Exactly.
know
Yes.
each other, and spend time to take care of those who are vulnerable in this phase of life.
Exactly. You know, one of the words I'm recently, and I've used it myself, so you know, I'm being self-reflective about this, is the word, like, for instance, sexist or racist. The moment we label
Mm,
people, we negate them. I think it's much kinder to say people who are practicing racist actions,
mm-hmm.
because that separates that from the human soul, and it also gives them an opportunity to make a different choice.
Sure, it
You know.
does.
So
It
thank you
does.
so much. Is there anything else you would like to leave us with?
I think that I really appreciate, again, the opportunity. And if anyone has any questions and wants to know more about the stories, that, you know, I could sit down and talk forever. So I appreciate the opportunity to just share. Some of the stories are very heartbreaking. And yes, they do bring emotional sense. And no, there's not a solution, but our mantra, our goal is to meet one person at a time, and
Mhm.
to let that one person at a time. We can't solve the whole problem, there's no way, but we can let someone know that they are seen and they are heard and they are worth the time, no matter if it's just trying to learn a simple hello or if it's trying to draw a simple line. It doesn't matter. You're worth that as a human, to know that there's someone who wants to hear you. Listen, the connections are, you're like family by the time you leave. And then for us in this instant in Greece, a lot of times that we're just a bridge and they go on to another country. So we have family members who've gone on to Germany, who are going on to other parts, and that's my goal one day, maybe to go get to see them. But these connections that you make are lasting ones, and you keep up through Facebook. Thank goodness for the social media, because you get to know where people land, and they vice versa know what you're doing. But I think that that's it. But in other more information, like I said, I could talk forever about the personal stories and about the individual names and individual families, the children working in the parks, taking the art to them, taking the music to them, whether they be street living, whether they be only able to get out of their apartment for a certain time of the day, just on and on and on and on. So I'm available. Let me know.
Dr. Kim Parrish, you are welcome back anytime with more stories. And I was thinking, you know, maybe partially we say there is a solution, we just don't know what it is yet. And maybe that comes through one person at a time stepping up, you know, and coming in and bringing their talents and resources. And if you're a listener listening today, I want you to know that every human being has talents and resources, and we can all help in whatever small way that we give. It's like a huge, I always hated those 1,000-piece puzzles, you know, because they seem so overwhelming. And I would start, like most people do, with the edges and then work my way in. But the point is, they eventually became a whole picture. You know, so if each one of us thinks of ourselves as even that tiniest piece of that puzzle, you remember the one that's like always so small and you can't figure out where it goes until you get all the other bigger pieces in, and then you go, oh, there it is, you know. And I think that we have to value ourselves enough to realize that we contribute. And like you said, there's something about giving to other people that just makes us feel like whole human beings. You know, I just don't think we were meant to
Agreed.
just stay focused on ourselves all the time. So I'm humbled, I'm awed, and I'm very grateful that you came on today. And I'm sure that people who are listening to this podcast will greatly benefit from it. If you know, even if it doesn't instill them to cross the ocean and come to Greece, at least they will have some kind of insight into what's happening, you know, outside of our world here. So at a very minimum. So thank you so much.
Thank you for asking. And of course, in the States, we have refugees there too. So invite someone in that you don't know and that doesn't speak your language, perhaps, and maybe show them something.
Show them some kindness, you know, because that's all that people are really seeking, like you said, to be seen, to be heard, just that basic human respect, and to have some kindness in their day. And I found that when you're kind to others, the kindness comes back, you know. It's like a
Yes,
boomerang. Well,
indeed it does.
Thank you very much. And we're going to end for today. Take
Thank you
care,
for having
everybody.
me.
You're so welcome. And to our listeners today, if you would like to support these podcasts and you find them valuable, realize that you can support the podcast for only 99 cents a month. But regardless of whether or not you want to support it, if you have a topic or if you have comments about these podcasts, feel free to hit the message button that you'll find below and reach out to me and let me know what you would like to hear. So for today, this is Dr. Mary Kay Keller signing off on today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening.